one student's portfolio, and he was talking a little bit about the colors on there. So I want to show you a neat tool that one of the instructors who teaches design showed me, which is, where is it? Whoop, I'm in the wrong folder.
It's Adobe Cooler, right?
Yeah. Which is, if you have a color, how do you find other colors to go with it when you're building an application? Well, this is a pretty neat site, and that sample portfolio that I showed you that I built a few weeks ago, this is how I did it. So basically, you can pick any color, and it's got this wheel where it shows you contrasting or complementary colors. So I actually use this with the little portfolio that I showed you guys, how I found the colors. So what I did was, I decided I was going to use this orange from Bootstrap. So I decided I like that orange color, so I figured out what the hexadecimal value of that color was, which is really slow to load. Then I basically put that color value in here and used the wheel to get complementary color. So I used this orange from the Bootstrap warning, and when I put that orange in, it gave me this blue, this light blue, you know, sort of something like this. And then I can click and get the value. So I just created my own custom style sheet, and that way I've got colors that are going to kind of either complement each other or contrast well. The other thing you can do is you can actually grab colors from an image. So for example, let's say you've got a logo from a customer and they're asking you to design an application. How do you know what colors either are in that logo or what colors will make sense to use? You know, so if I pick this, I can click on any spot. It sort of shows you the palette that's here. I can click on one. So just a kind of a neat tool that will help you in terms of putting your sites together. Because I was talking with a student whose portfolio is already up online, but there were several very dark colors that didn't necessarily play that well together. So we were talking about, you know, how do you figure this out if you're not necessarily a designer? So the link to this is here. It's in the tools and resources. The URL is just color.adobe.com. Might be something to play around with. So what we want to do today is we want to look at, first of all, how do we get a Node and Express site up on a cloud hosting service, which is something you need to do for next week. Okay, so we're going to do two walkthroughs. First, we're going to go through and try and get an Express site up and running on Windows Azure. I sent you an email. I sent you two emails about Azure. There was an email last week with instructions on how to create your Azure account. It takes a bit of time and it's a bit of a process. I sent you another email earlier this week asking you to have your Azure account set up for today. If you didn't do it, you're not going to have time to do it in class, which is why I asked you to do it at home. So you'll just have to watch, and you can try and deploy your site to Azure later on your own time. We'll also look at Heroku, which is where I've deployed this one, which is another cloud hosting service. There are other cloud services you can use. There's Cloud9, there's DigitalOcean, there's a whole bunch of other ones. Doesn't really matter where your Node site is deployed, but it has to be deployed and running for next week, for next Wednesday when you submit. Okay. So we're going to do that. We're going to look at deployment today, and then we're going to start talking about MongoDB and Mongoose. So the database end of our Node and Express applications and how we get our Express applications talking to our database. Okay. So inside of the Week 5 folder, we've got a few resources for you here. I'm going to play this. This is a 3-minute demonstration by Scott Hanselman, who's a senior developer at Microsoft, at how we can take a Node and Express site that we've pushed to Git for source control and how we can deploy straight from GitHub to Azure. So we're going to watch that video, and then there's a walkthrough tutorial here, which we're actually going to do. Again, if you don't have your Azure account set up, either you can try and set it up quickly now, the instructions are in the email, or else you'll just have to watch and do this on your own time. Okay. We also have a quick demo of, we're going to try and deploy to Heroku as well, so you have a couple of options we're going to walk through. So I'm going to start this video 3 minutes, and somebody please remind me to restart the recording. Okay, so let's create a basic Express site, and let's see if we can publish it to Azure. So if you want to open up a command prompt,
terminal for those Mac users.
If you're on the lab computer, when you open it up, you'll be at C users, GC student. You might want to create a node directory for today. If you're on your own machine, you already have a node directory, and you can just go into your node directory. So then I'm going to create a new Express application. I'll call it week 5. Whoops. And I want to use EJS rather than Jade for my template. So I'll type Express-E week 5.
See, now he says don't put install here. Don't use the npm install and go direct. They do the npm install on Azure.
All right. So now let's go and create a Git repository called week 5, and then we'll commit and push this to GitHub. So go to your GitHub account, create a new repository. I'll call mine COMP2068. I'll call it week 5 PM.
Put a git ignore it too, right? I got that one.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to add a git ignore and choose node. So I'll create the repository. So I've got this empty repository. We'll go back to our command line. We'll initialize Git. Whoops, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I want to go into my week 5 directory and initialize Git in here. So I'll do cd week 5 and Git in it. Then we'll add all of the files that Express built to our local repository. And now we'll make our first commit. Git commit with a message of first commit. So notice when we use the, actually, sorry, I'll wait, I'll come back to that. So now I'm just going to go to my repository on GitHub. I'm going to copy, click this copy button down here on the bottom right to copy my URL. So git remote add paste.
Name it as well, right? No?
This to be origin.
I think it's master.
Before or after?
Before, I believe.
Sorry, git remote add.
Let's see.
We'll try it that way. And now I can git push unconditionally origin master.
Let's try that again.
I think that was wrong. The master wasn't right.
Okay, let's just do it again. Just if you pull up on your thing, you know, you have to put the origin in. Git remote add origin. Oh, so this is the same thing as last time. Because you added a git ignore file that doesn't exist. So you have to do a pull first. But you can't do a pull because.
Yeah.
So here's what I would recommend: kill your remote and just do it again. Just the order of operations.
Yeah, I don't think I want. I'm going to delete my repo. I'm going to recreate it. I'm not going to do the git ignore.
Do it locally. So if you
I'll do it through here.
Yeah, if you go to your
Okay, I'll try it through.
add.
So I'll try it through the client. Go to my node, Lesson5, and add.
Give it a sec. 47 minutes ago.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's,
Wrong one. Just looking for the wrong one.
it's not opening.
What did you call it?
I called it Lesson5. Why isn't it here?
You could look for it.
I did. It's right here.
You call it Lesson 5 or Week 5?
Oh. Right, I called it week 5. Sorry, okay. So I'll publish this. I got rid of the repo.
Yeah. Can we do it?
No.
The whole thing? Oh, mine. There you go. Now, and that'll work. Try it. Just go back after you create a repository. Go back and try it again on your tool. There.
So I'm going to try again to push the Git.
It's done. It's done.
So now there's our Express site on GitHub.
Finally. We need to get a
After a little bit of pain.
Yeah. We do need a git ignore file though. Otherwise it'll mess up because it'll add the node modules in there.
All right, so how do you want to add
Just
it?
go into, you can go locally, go into your local folder and just create a, right click and create a .gitignore file that's empty. Make sure you get rid of the text, all that stuff.
So we're going to create a git ignore file inside our local directory.
I love it. How about PowerShell? Do you have PowerShell? I can do it there for you. I love it. By the way, this is all great, eh? When as a developer, sometimes we need to, be persistent.
Okay.
I think is
So
the answer.
initial it.
So go touch space .gitignore. Enter. Nope. Yours doesn't have it. All we need is to get that file created. So maybe you can do it in brackets. You can create whatever file you want, right? So it's just all we need is a container that we can modify it. It does have that on the Windows, on the Mac side though. But not to say that Mac is superior, by the way. Right?
Okay, so I'm going to make a new blank file and save it in week 5
Let's see if it allows you to.
as .gitignore.
Let's see. Perfect. Now put in node underscore modules.
So what we want to add here
That's it. Save.
is ignore node modules and save. Now we'll need to push this change up to GitHub. So you just need a .gitignore with just node modules in here. So I'm going to go back.
Get rid of the text document.
I can ignore that text document, but I'm just going to click on my changes. I'm going to make a new commit. So we've added the git ignore. I'll commit that change. Push to GitHub.
And if you notice the, go back for a second. If you notice the tool, right? It went from, on the right, the gray circle on the right was open, turned into a solid circle, right? Solid circle means it's a committed change. It's up on GitHub, right?
So now GitHub shows me that I have 2 commits. So now we should be able to deploy this to Windows Azure for those of you who set up your accounts like I asked you to do.
Who hasn't set up their account yet? Okay.
I can get going, so I just did a visual.
Okay.
Okay.
So in Azure, the way to get here, actually I'll close right out. The simplest way to get here is go to manage.windowsazure.com. Now this gives you the older version of the panel. In the video, he was using the newer portal. I actually kind of prefer the older version. It seems to be more functionality here. So this is what the panel looks like. If you click on Web Apps and click on New, so we want to create an empty Node app. So we'll click on New,
Gallery.
Web App, and because this is going to be a Node application, if we pick from the gallery, down here, if we scroll down, it's in alphabetical order. We have a Node.js empty web application. So that's the template that we want. So this tells Azure it is a Node application. So click on Node.js empty web app. And if I scroll to the bottom, there's a next button down the bottom right here. There's an arrow. So click on that. Now it asks for a URL. So I'll call it week 5 p.m. So it'll be run at a subdomain of azurewebsites.net with whatever name I give it. We all have to have a unique name. And I'll click the complete button down at the bottom right. It'll take a minute, and it'll set up this blank Node application. So it chugs along, and then it will be available at the subdomain you create, .azurewebsites.net. So it just takes a second. Mine is ready now. So to connect it up to my GitHub account, I can just click on the name of my website. And on this main dashboard page, there's a link that says set up deployment from source control. Well, let's do that. So we can deploy from any one of these places. I'll pick GitHub. Now, I'm already logged into GitHub. If you're not, it'll prompt you for your GitHub account credentials. So enter them here. And then it shows you all of your GitHub repositories. So here's my week 5 p.m. repository. So I'm going to connect that, and then Azure will try to pull the code from this repository.
Now here's what we're going to see. We're going to see if, we never did the npm install command, right? That's required usually for node modules, for Express and so on. In the video, it says that the npm install is done here remotely, and it looks like it's good. Let's see if it works.
So it says our site's active. So now here's the URL down on the right. So this should be, hopefully, there's our Express site. So we created the site with the Express generator. We didn't run the npm install yet, though. in order to deploy it. So we created the site, we push to Git with the git ignore file, and then we just connect from Azure to any GitHub repository, and now our site will load. So if we make a change to it, let's say we want this title to change. If we make a change and commit to GitHub, we set this up for continuous deployment. So as soon as we push, let's see whether Azure will then pull the new version. So I'm just going to open up my directory. I'll open up my roots and my index.js file, because this is the file that's supplying that title to the home page. We worked with this file last week. So right here on line 6, this is where the title comes from. So if we change the title from Express to week 5 and save that change, now if I go back to my Git client, it notices, okay, yeah, we changed roots index.js. So I'm going to make a new commit. Changed homepage title, and I'm going to make a new commit to GitHub. And now I'm going to push that change.
So again, big open gray circle to, when it's done, a gray dot. There it is.
So that third commit is done. If I go back to GitHub and refresh, we've got 3 commits now. Here's my commit message. We changed the homepage title. Now let's see what Azure's doing. Already it's redeployed. Here's our commit message with our Git, our commit, unique commit ID and my commit message. And now if I refresh the page, we've got our new version. So you should be able to take your assignment that you've already put up on GitHub, and we should be able to deploy it to Azure through those steps. Basically just create a new web app, make sure it's an empty Node.js application, connect it up to your assignment repository on GitHub. Okay? Then anytime you push new commits, it will automatically be redeployed.
Anyone having issues with this right now? You have an issue? I'll come around. Well, you go to the next one.
Okay. Any questions? Now I'm going to show you another place where you can deploy. So Azure's one option. You have access to Azure as through your DreamSpark account, so it's a good idea to set up and use that account. I'm going to show you another cloud service that you might want to sign up with. I'm going to have you do it. You can also try deploying there. This is where I've deployed my assignment, which is Heroku. We can create an account here in about 10 seconds. So if you go to Heroku.com, I'll just log out of my Heroku account. So go to Heroku.com, click the sign up button for free. Just prompts you, put a username and password in, you get a confirmation email, and click the confirmation link, your account's active. So go ahead and do that now. It takes you about 30 seconds. So Heroku.com, sign up. I'm not even sure that it asks you for your name. It might ask you for your first and last name and your email. So go ahead and create that account. And be sure you check your email. The confirmation email comes right away. So as soon as you're done, you should have the email with an activation link that lets you set up your account. So just make sure you log in. Anybody having trouble getting in? Is anybody logged into Heroku yet? Okay.
I think mine had frozen last minute with the registration form. It's kind of stopped.
Try refreshing it maybe.
Yeah. So I guess if you're not-
So once you're in, there'll be a bunch of links asking you what kind of application you want to create. Well, obviously, we're going to create a Node.js application, right? And it gives you, just like on Azure, it gives you the option. So you can go ahead and click on Create a Node.js application.
It froze mine with that button.
So you create a new application. Now, you can either supply your own name, unique name for the application, or you can let Heroku assign it. I'm going to pick my own, so I'll call it, COMP2068 week 5. And I'll just click Create Application. So put in any subdomain. They have to be unique. We can't all have the same name, obviously. So I'm going to create an application. Now they have some different deployment options. We actually can deploy it. They have a command line tool called the Heroku tool belt. So we could use the command line and deploy to Heroku that way. We could use Dropbox, or, well, let's use GitHub. We already have the repo on GitHub. Now let's deploy it to Heroku. So click on Connect to GitHub. If you're already logged into GitHub, it probably already knows and shows your GitHub username here. If not, just log into your GitHub account. And now type the name of the repo you want to deploy. We can actually deploy the same repository to both Azure and Heroku. So I'm just going to do the same repository. So it found my repository called COMP2068 week 5 PM. I'll click the connect button. Now we have the option. By default, it will deploy manually, meaning it doesn't automatically update the web server every time we push to GitHub. So maybe if we're working on changes that we don't want to automatically publish, we would leave that disabled. For now, I'll just click Enable Automatic Deploys. So much like Azure, every time I make a new commit, it will automatically deploy the new version to the web server. And then down at the bottom, it asks what branch do I want to deploy. Well, I only have one branch. I'll just click on Deploy Branch. And we can see the log here. And when it's done, we now have, it says my app was deployed successfully. Click on this to view it. So now we've got it running here as well with the latest commit that says week 5 instead of Express. So again, if I make a change and make another commit, then both Azure and Heroku should be updated. So I'm going to go in. I'll go back to my file and just put in a couple of characters along with the title. I've changed it week 5. I've just put in a few stars here. I'm going to make another commit, and then we can check whether, again, both websites are being refreshed automatically. So I'll make another commit. So now deploying to both Azure and Heroku. I'll commit that change. I'll push it up to GitHub again. And then I should be able to refresh both my Azure website and my Heroku website. They both should be updated. So my GitHub push is done. If I refresh on Azure, we've got our change. And if I refresh my Heroku site, same thing. And we can actually see the deployment log. So if I go into, if I just refresh or click on deploy again, in Heroku it gives me an I think, an activity feed. Yeah, if I click activity, it shows me all of the commits, when they were done. It gives a version number, and it shows me the GitHub commit ID. Azure will show me the same, right? If I go back to deployments, here's my deployment history. So it shows all my commits. So you don't have to deploy to both servers. You only need one, but you've got some options. Whichever one you find is easier to work with, you can use. Or if you want to use another service, like Cloud9 or DigitalOcean or something like that, that's fine. They will all run your Node Express applications too.
I've been playing around with it a little bit. Azure doesn't like private repositories very much. I keep getting errors when I try to
Okay.
a private repository. The other thing that I noticed is when I originally created my repository, my created the Express generator, I changed the package.json file to use NodeMon, and when I tried to upload it to Azure, Azure hacked out because it doesn't run NodeMon. It wants to actually run Node command.
Okay.
So anybody that's already done that, they'll have to make the change.
I'm just going to repeat those for everybody's benefit. A couple of tips that Brad noticed with using Azure. The first one is it doesn't really like it if it's trying to pull from a private repository, because Azure doesn't necessarily have all the permissions it needs.
It was working better for me, but it just, like, it was working fine last night. But this morning I haven't been able to do stuff, so I don't know if it's a hiccup or what's
The other thing that we did last week was we used NodeMon, right? So here was our week 4. We installed NodeMon, so locally when we made changes, our app would restart automatically. The problem is we don't want that to happen on the server. So before we upload, we want to make sure in package.json, we want to make sure we're using Node and not NodeMon when we deploy to the cloud. So we want to change that line back to using the Node process. Does anybody have any questions, or anybody else having problems getting deployed to one server or the other? So the other thing we want to start to look at today is MongoDB and Mongoose. So this is the M part of the mean stack. So we need to talk a little bit about what NoSQL is. So far you guys have really only worked with relational databases. Robert, question?
Is that no as in number or no as in no?
No as in there isn't any.
Got it.
You can work with the database and there's no SQL commands involved at all. Okay. So basically NoSQL, it was a response to some of the limitations we had with relational databases. Okay. And one of the big ones is scale. That our relational databases don't tend to scale very well as our applications grow. Okay. Also, we spend a lot of time when we're building applications using relational databases. You know, we have our tables that contain all our data, but then in our business logic, we have classes that represent our business objects. So we might have things like, you know, if we're in Blackboard, we have things like student and objects, instructor classes, course classes, and we spend a lot of time mapping the tables and writing CRUD operations between the two. Our model's also not flexible. If you think about building a web application, if that application's used by a lot of people and it's going to stick around, over time it's going to evolve, and that means as it evolves, we're constantly going to have to go back and change our database. Let's think about if we built a shopping cart, we built an e-commerce site for a business that was selling products online, and over time that business sold a lot. What kinds of changes, what kinds of things do you think they might want us to add if we started with a really simple store, and that store did really well, and they sold a lot of products? What kinds of features do you think in time would be something that we might have to add that are going to require us to go back and make changes in our database? Okay, so now all of a sudden they want to offer promotions. So we need not only to build a promotions table, but when somebody orders, we need a promotion code table in the field in the order table. So if Nick buys something, he can put in a promo code and we can save that to the database. That would be a good example. Tyler? Sorry? Yep, okay, maybe we want to track user statistics in a way we weren't doing before. What other kinds of things would you do if you had a small e-commerce site that suddenly became quite a big e-commerce site? Yep, we could put items on sale. So we might have to have a Boolean field, or actually two fields. We might have an on sale, true, false, and we might have a sale price. We might also have a sale start date and sale end date. So we could put an item, we're going to put it on sale starting on this date for this period of time. So we'd have to make those changes in the database. Anything else you could think of? What other kinds of things would we might have to do?
We might want source information about when certain items are going to be resupplied.
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
Users start migrating.
They could start doing that. What if we expanded our store? Let's say we had a client here in Barrie. We built an e-commerce site for them, and all of a sudden people not just in Barrie were buying their products. What else? What other kinds of things might we have to add into it if they got really big? We might have different languages, and if we have different languages, what other kinds of features would that maybe mean we're changing in our database? Because suddenly we're not just selling locally, but we're selling internationally. We might have different currencies, right? We might have to change some of the rules. Maybe we have rules around a phone number. Well, the phone number formatting in Canada, if suddenly we have customers in other countries, does your phone number, and does it look the same? Right? So we might have to change those rules. So the more successful our applications are over time, the more changes we have to make. So with a relational database, that's a lot of work to go in and make those changes. Part of the idea of NoSQL is our applications are designed to be flexible. We expect they're going to change. It's less work for us to change them. So in a relational database, visually our data looks something like this. Basically a series of grids, rows and columns, tables that are related. So NoSQL, we also have some different terms. In NoSQL databases, we don't have tables. Instead of tables, we have objects called collections. Okay? And they're similar to tables. They function in similar ways. If we were going to build Blackboard with a NoSQL database, we'd have a student's collection there. But that collection is a lot more flexible than a student's table would be in a MySQL database. And our data is usually stored just as keys and values. It's very easy to read as well what our data looks like. So they're designed to be really high performance so we can put data in and pull data out really quickly, and we can scale them. This works well if we're on the cloud, because on the cloud, as you can see, if I go into resources, right, it'll tell me my application is using, well, one free, if I want to scale this up, I could just say edit, and I can scale this up to use more server instances. So having a database that can scale along with that works well. Okay. So all of our collections are schemaless. So each record in a NoSQL database, they're not called records. If we have 10 students in a student's collection, each student is called a document. Okay. And each document in the same collection can actually have a different format, and we'll look at that. Okay. So the format can just evolve over time. We don't have to go in and actually change this underlying structure first. We also can nest documents inside of other documents. So now for master-child or parent-child data, we no longer have data in two related tables, like a student and a bunch of grades. We'd simply have a student's collection, and inside of a Keel's student document is going to be, all of his grades are going to be right there. So if we want to show Akil his grades, we only have to go one place in the database. It means we don't have to write joins, we don't have to create foreign keys. And our documents are typically formed for the version we're going to use are in JSON format, which is great because our Node apps already know what JSON is. So here's an example of what a MongoDB document looks like. Okay, so here would be the full, all the data one record, or I'm not gonna call them records, I'm gonna call them documents. What do you notice if you think about how this compares to what a record in a relational database like a MySQL database looks like? What things do you notice about this sample that are maybe a bit different?
The dates, there's 2 ISO dates, whatever that means.
Yep, why are there 2 dates? Look carefully at how this is structured. Why do we have one date here and a second date there? ISO date's just a function. Kenzie?
This data structure has depths of nesting.
Yeah, it's a one-to-many relationship, right? So we have one document, but that document has multiple grades. It got a grade on this date, and it got another grade on another date, right? So in a relational database, these would be broken out into related records in different tables. In a NoSQL database, it's actually embedded all in a single document. What else do you notice about it?
We only have one ID.
Yep. There is automatically, when we use MongoDB, it will automatically create a column called _ID, and the data type is object ID, and it assigns, if this is a MySQL database, we manually have to create a column and make sure we set auto increment to on, set that as a primary key. That's baked right in. Every collection has that automatically. As soon as we insert a record, a document with a value, it gives it a unique ID. We can even have an array as a value. And notice everything is key value pairs. So it's really easy for somebody to look at this and get a sense of what this data means visually. Right? It's just in key value pairs. So the MongoDB documents are here. I've put a link. I'll put this up. These slides are on Blackboard for you. So we'll maybe go ahead and poke around at the documentation. Their documentation's really very well done. It's really easy to see, and their code samples are quite good. In fact, if we had a look, we'll maybe come back to this a bit later. But if we have a quick look, here's the documents. So for example, you know, what does it look like to do an update? Well, they give us some really good sample code of what it looks like. Good explanations. Okay. Any questions about what this document looks like or how it's put together? So I'm going to try not to use the words table and record. I'm going to try to use the words collections and documents, because that's really what we're dealing with when we're talking about Mongo. So why MongoDB? It's not the only NoSQL database. It's one of the first, and it's probably the most popular. It's been around for almost a decade now, and it comes from the word humongous. You'll notice the word Mongo in the middle of humongous. That's where the developers came up with the name. Okay? CouchDB is another very popular NoSQL database, and most of them work in a very similar vein. But Mongo tends to integrate really well with Node and Express as part of the whole mean stack. That's why we're going to use it in this course. Okay? So how does Mongo store the data? It stores all our data as JSON, JavaScript object notation, that's converted to binary. So we take a JavaScript array, we convert it to ones and zeros, that's how our data is stored. So it's really fast, and it means it's really easy to transmit data between our database and our Node application, right? Because it's all JavaScript. Mongo is supported by most cloud hosting. So on Azure, there is a MongoDB add-on that we can add. The other place that we have that I'm going to suggest actually for next week, I'm going to require everybody to go here and create a free account. This is a free service, basically MongoDB running in the cloud. So you can create, I think they give you 2 free databases and 500 megabytes of space. So what we can do, I mean, for today, we'll work locally. We'll create and work on a local MongoDB. But for those of you on the lab computers, that's a pain, because every week you come back and your database is gone, right? It's not going to persist on the lab machines. If you're on a laptop, that's fine. You can just work locally. So the solution is, rather than working locally, what we can do is we can put our database in the cloud. Then we can connect from our own local server when we're building our Express site, but also Azure can talk to Mongodb, Heroku can talk to Mongodb. No matter what cloud service we're using to host our Node application, we can connect to our database here. So for next week, I'm going to want you, don't need to do it today, but when we start a class next week, I want you to go in. It's just as fast as the Heroku sign up, right? You go in, you basically create a free account, give it a name, username, password. They send you a confirmation link, and you're done. You can go ahead and start building your database, your MongoDB databases. Okay? So you don't need to do it today. We'll do it tomorrow. So I think I mentioned the unique object ID already, and there's a very good reason we call it NoSQL, because we don't use any SQL commands. So for example, if we wanted to, let's say we had a collection of posts, we were building a blog. To run a query, if we wanted to find all the posts that had the word Mongo in the title, here would be the syntax. db.posts, which is the name of our collection, .find, which runs a query, where the title field contains the word Mongo. So that's easier than writing an SQL query. So we'll play around. There is Mongo as a command line interface. We'll play around with that in a bit so we can look at how we can do create, read, update, delete using the command line. Okay. So where do you get it? No matter what machine you're on today, whether you're on a lab machine or whether you're on your own machine, you should download and install MongoDB. It's free. It takes a few minutes. It's about 60 megs. So if you can go to mongodb.com, actually it's .org, but the .com will redirect you. So if you can download and install it, if you are a Mac user, and James, this will run on Linux. There is a Linux installer. If you're a Mac user, the instructions are a little more advanced for anybody that's on a Mac. Okay. On Windows, it's fairly straightforward. Just download the MSI file and run it. So you can get that started. And as I said, for next week, I want you to create a Mongo Lab account so that we also have a database available in the cloud. I'm not sure why I had asked for MongoDB to be installed on the lab images in my software request. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be there from what students told me this morning, much to my chagrin. Robert?
Where do we go to sign up if we wanted to sign up right now?
Mongolab.com. The second link right here on the slide. But for today, let's make sure we install it and can run it locally, just so you can kind of get familiar with it. So it will take a little bit to download and install. Maybe somebody just give me a wave when it's kind of downloaded and installed so I don't move ahead until people are ready. So mongodb.com or mongodb.org and download. I think this is a good spot for us to take a pause. So we'll let MongoDB download, we'll run the install, we'll come back just after 2:30. We'll start the MongoDB server running, and we'll play around with create, read, update, and delete on the command line. Then we'll look at how do we get our application set up to connect and talk to our MongoDB. And then I think we'll stop for today. And then we'll have it all set up so next week we can do create, read, update, and delete.